Welcome back to Outside the System. Today's episode is a conversation with my good friend Chris Chaney, the co-founder and CEO of Fancurve. Fancurve is a Web3 company that works with major sports teams to create digital collectibles in the form of NFTs. But before Fancurve, Chris started and ran the now acquired company Infinite Esports and Entertainment, which gives him a ton of insight into the ongoing collision of gaming, sports, and gambling. There's a lot packed into this shorter than usual episode, so without further ado, let's get into it. Chris, thanks for joining me on Outside the System.
Hey Neil, thanks so much for having me.
So obviously, you and I could talk about probably dozens of different topics, and we've worked together over the years. I think the best place to start is what you're working on now. So Chris, you're the co-founder and CEO of Fancurve. Maybe we can just introduce Fancurve a little bit before diving into a bunch of other things.
Absolutely. Yeah, very, very happy to. And this should be fun. So Fancurve was started last year. Essentially last summer is when I had the initial idea for essentially building a company at the intersection of Web3 and blockchain technology and sports on the other side. And sports really meaning fandom, meaning passion, meaning tribalism that we see all across the world. And Web3, partly in the context of technology and meaning leveraging the technology. We don't like to call ourselves a Web3 or NFT business as such. We're a fandom company at the end of the day. That's what we do. We leverage Web3 and blockchain technology. So started thinking about that intersection last summer, and then over the coming months, started refining an idea that ultimately became Fancurve. And Fancurve is a licensed sports digital apparel and collectibles company. So what we do as Fancurve is we have a platform that offers to fans, and our initial focus is football, i.e. soccer fans, digital wearables, digital apparel. We are focused at the moment and at the outset on soccer jerseys, which are really cultural items. If you look at, the jersey, it means so much, even more and beyond the game. You see skateboarders wearing soccer jerseys, celebrities, music artists. They're actually fashion items at this point. So we are selling digital, or we're providing fans with digital apparel and collectibles because we believe that within digital worlds and alongside these digital identities that people are building and that are becoming increasingly important, at the same time, we want to show off and showcase who we are. Where are we from? What are we passionate about? What are we into? What tribe do we belong to? What community are we a part of? And, sports and soccer with 3.5 billion fans all around the world, in soccer, one of the major ways of doing so is by wearing a jersey. And most of the time in the physical world, you can spot those from miles away. Oh, that's an FC Barcelona jersey. That's a, Manchester United jersey. And people wear them to, quote unquote, show their colors, show this is my tribe. This is the community I'm a part of. And they do it all around the world. And so we want to give people an opportunity to showcase their passions, their fandom, show which tribe they are a part of, and do so in the digital world through digital wearables, digital apparel, which also are collectibles at the same time. And there's a huge jersey collector culture in the physical world that we think is also trickling over into the digital world. So that's what we're doing. We're taking your old school jersey that you might have in your, in your closet, or that you buy from your favorite club's fan shop, and we're turning it digital in simple ways. And then you can put it on your avatar, you can put it on your character, you can dress up in-game characters, you can create a 3D locker where you can showcase all your wares and customize it to your interests and again, to your passions. That's what we're doing. We're ultimately creating digital experiences for fans.
And so this probably, because of the way sports rights work, I'm sure you have to work with teams directly to make this happen. So how has the reception been among, teams on the business side? I'm sure on one hand, they view it as a new revenue opportunity, a new way to monetize an asset that they, already have and are already monetizing in the physical world. Are you noticing, certain trends in terms of certain regions or clubs being more open to this kind of thing, or is there are there pockets of resistance, or what's kind of the feedback you typically get when you're talking to a club?
So we started actively having conversations with primarily football clubs, to your point, as well as individual players about 7 or so months ago, call it half a year. And during that time, we've spoken with close to 300 clubs and players, mostly centered on Europe, but also in South America and a little bit even in Asia, but certainly mostly across Europe, across the leagues and players that are playing in Europe. The reception has been resoundingly positive. It's actually been incredible. It's been beyond what we had expected. And a few things that we've noticed. One, the space of digital wearables within sports is brand new. It's brand new. And in most of our conversations, there's also an educational component. What is it that you guys do? How does it work? And how can it provide value to our fans? And when we talk about the vision for Fancurve and our story, and that includes our individual backgrounds as a team, people get really excited. They get really, really excited. And I think that there is a lot of belief that not just digital identities, but digital wearables, digital, apparel, digital merchandise will be a key part of this future of fan engagement and fan interaction. I think there's a lot of belief among clubs and players and their representatives around that. So we're doing some evangelizing, if you'd like, but with the hundreds of conversations that we've had at this point, they've been incredibly positive. Yes, some are seeing it purely as a revenue generator, which we do think is the wrong way to look at it. That is and can be part of your strategy, but it shouldn't be the sole strategy. In the same way that we're educating our potential partners, they also need to educate their respective audiences. That has to be the first step. Education, introducing them to this world of Web3, maybe dispelling some of the myths and maybe some of the preconceived notions that people do have when they hear blockchain and they hear NFTs and Web3 and metaverse. It starts with education, and then it goes to building what essentially is a sub-community of their fans within Web3, within this digital world, right? So you have your large fan community of potentially millions and millions, hundreds of millions of fans, and then you build essentially a Web3 sub-community within that. And then you add value to that community as you're building it, and then you can certainly monetize it. But if you monetize or attempt to monetize first, without the education, without the community building, without the value creation, there is a likelihood that you will fail.
It's like trying to sell a vaporware product or something. You can only do that for so long before you actually have to deliver. If you're selling a digital collectible for community, then you better have that kind of community as part of the ethos behind it. This is an interesting offshoot. I didn't think we'd be getting into this part so early, but the interesting thing that's happened over the last couple months, right, is like, it's obviously we're no longer in this sort of limitless bull market that we were in for a while. The thing that I've noticed projects focusing on more that are the most successful or that are, seemingly going to weather the storm the best are the ones that are actually focused on why they're using Web3 and blockchain for what they're doing, versus just the ones who sort of attach that as an adjective to help them, help them raise some money, right? And so I guess one of my questions then for Fancurve is like, so part of the value that I would see for this being done via Web3 is the sort of ability to use your digital fashion products in multiple ecosystems, right? So I could see you using it in part of like a game, or maybe using it as, so you directly own that digital asset versus it being part of, FIFA's ecosystem or something, just to use as an example. Is that kind of the ethos and reason why you went with the Web3 backbone on this?
Absolutely. And that's why I also prefaced when introducing Fancurve that for us, it's really just about leveraging the technology. When we're talking about NFTs, we're really only talking about NFTs in the context of a technology layer or a technology that we're using. I think fundamentally, fans don't care. They don't care. I mean, I would say most consumers don't care. And that doesn't mean that that it doesn't mean a negative sentiment. I think they want to have fun. They want things to be accessible, easy to use, right? They want to have great experiences. What the technology behind it is, I think, totally irrelevant to most consumers. So for us, it's kind of the same. We obviously appreciate and value the technology, but we are leveraging the technology. And to your point as well, we are envisioning a world in which you have a digital wardrobe that could include hundreds of items potentially. And those digital assets, those digital wearables, you can wear on your avatar, on your character across many different games and call them digital worlds. I'm reluctant to use the word metaverse, but call them digital worlds and experiences. And you dress, quote unquote, you dress up. And yes, there is some level of interoperability that is enabled through blockchain technology, some of which today is a little bit clunky because, again, we're early days. But yes, that's fundamentally the reason why we want to leverage this technology. So one, you own the asset, you can sell it, on the open market. Any of the, you could sell it on our marketplace, you could sell it on another marketplace. Ultimately, it won't matter. So you have full control and you can take it with you, take the assets with you wherever you go, hopefully wherever you go, wear them, have fun, have a good time, and sort of the sense of openness, of open ecosystem. That's ultimately what we believe in and why we're looking to leverage the technology.
Yeah. One thing that I know you have a lot of experience with, which we haven't talked about yet on the episode, is gaming. And you and I have obviously talked a lot about sort of the intersection of gaming, Web3, even more sports betting culture, sports, obviously, in general. There's a lot of cool projects out there that have been started, over the past, call it, year and a half at the sort of Web3 and sports intersection. What are some of the coolest ones in your opinion, other than, obviously your own? What are some of the other ones that sort of catch your eye and get your attention?
Well, there are some very ambitious projects.
Yes.
I will say that. But you have to have. I think you can't be in Web3. I mean, you can, but I'm making a statement here. You can't be in Web3 without having ambition. Like I feel like this is the time and this is the space where you want to be ambitious. You want to be bold. And there's, I think, a lot of like-minded builders out there that are also ambitious and that are also bold, and that is something I'm excited about. So as far as interesting projects that I'm seeing, so there's a very, very cool game. It's a game. They just changed the name. It was called Monkey Ball, but now it's called Monkey League. So it's a Web3 esports game. It's soccer as well, but it's essentially soccer with monkeys. And they just raised a significant round of funding. The visuals look really cool. They have a very strong team, and now, I mean, tremendous investors, including one of my favorite investors in the space called Sixth Man Ventures. I think they're one of the sharpest investors within Web3. And yes, they are investors of Fancurve, so I'm totally biased, but Six Man Ventures for the win. So Monkey League is one. So it's a soccer game. It's like a monkey-based Web3 soccer game. So that combines gaming, soccer, and sports and Web3. So you get all three in one place with that one. So that's very cool. They have their own token, and again, I like the visuals, great funding, and I think really, really well thought through. You can create your own team, you can build a stadium and host matches in them. Some of it, of course, part of the roadmap. So that's one that I like a lot. So there's Monkey, again, used to be called Monkey Ball, now it's called Monkey League. So I like that one. Then I think WOGME United is an interesting one. WOGME United is essentially a Web3 sports brand now acquired a soccer team in England. It's Crawley Town FC, which is like, I don't know, fifth division or something of English football. So do have to put that into some context. It's a very low division football team. But their aspiration is to make it to the Premier League. Speaking of bold and ambitious, that is incredibly ambitious.
What a cool project, though, right? Like, so the people that bought into that one, right? You are essentially a co-owner of the team. I mean, that's what right? Are they running it as a DAO?
I'm not sure, technically speaking, if you are co-owner, but I think what you are is a decision maker. If we want to make that distinction between an owner and a decision maker. So if you own some of their NFTs, then you are able to make certain decisions. But I think fundamentally today, in a legal context, they're not owners, but you are part of the decision-making process. I do believe that the goal is true ownership, distributed ownership, but there are some challenges around that. And again, it's like, there's some obviously set structures in business and in sports, but I think that's the ultimate goal.
Yeah. I mean, neither of us are lawyers on this call, so it's all, none of this is expert opinion here on the legal side, but I'm speaking purely as a fan of how cool of an experience that would be to just, to be able to own a piece of a team. Because, as sports teams are obviously not inexpensive, even fifth league ones, right, are probably not cheap for the average person to be an owner of. And so this kind of democratizes that ownership and gives people who are probably already passionate fans. I would imagine there's a interesting overlap actually between, this is actually maybe a question for them, but of their sort of buyer group of that NFT, I wonder how much was fans of the team who wanted ownership and fans or people who are just Web3 soccer fans who are just thinking, hey, this would be really cool. I personally, I'm not even a huge soccer fan, and I would have been tempted to buy into that just because it would be so cool to own, not even own, but be a part decision maker of a professional team.
It's an interesting question. So the team itself is small. I hope I'm not offending anyone that is a fan, but they don't have a lot of fans. I mean, meaning just in the grand scheme of things.
Sure, yeah, they're not Chelsea
they have
or
a lot of fans. They're small. No, they're a very small team. Again, it's like fifth, fourth tier or something. So I don't think that a lot of their current fans have bought into it. I also don't know in terms of the exact location, is it like a more older audience that they have that's been going to matches for 30 or 40 or 100 years? I'm exaggerating, but so I don't think it's their current fan base primarily that's buying into this, but I think it's to your point. It's probably folks that are interested in sports and soccer, maybe specifically, and Web3. Love this idea of ownership. And then you know what? You don't even really need to be into soccer, just the idea, or sports period, just the idea of owning something cool like that, right? I think for some people it's also just like, this is really cool. Like the idea of owning a sports team. I love sports, but I don't even like sports. And here I get a chance to be part of a team and be part of like something really cool and novel. There's a novelty factor to that as well, right? But just in terms of fans, just so we can get a little bit of like level setting here, they have 1,000 season ticket holders. 1,000. Just to be, they have 1,000 season ticket holders. 1,000. So yes, this is mostly, I think, folks in the Web3 space, some NFT degens, and they have a fantastic group of investors. I mean, look at their list of investors and people that are behind it. Those are some really, really great people. So I think they're bringing in a new crowd. That's what the group's doing. They're bringing in a new crowd.
The interesting thing will be if this group of owners and sort of co-decision makers can boost the team's value over time by, getting it more press and notoriety and, just because of by nature of having, let's say I don't know how many NFT holders there are, but let's say there were 1,000 and they're vocal, right? I wonder if that would, improve the team's financial standing, which in turn would let them get better players, which in turn could improve their performance on the field. And then they might move up it'll be interesting to see how it works out in real life.
Yeah, there could be a bit of a flywheel. I mean, speaking of, sort of innovation within sports, obviously Wrexham was bought. This is a Welsh club that was bought by Ryan Reynolds and a partner. And so that is, I think, to me, really an example of, I mean, again, this is a smaller Welsh club, not as small as Crawley Town, but just, again, in the context of like a Chelsea or something. That club is receiving incredible attention now that Ryan Reynolds has taken over. And well, one of the things he's doing is he's launching a docu-series called Welcome to Wrexham, and they already have distribution with FX and I don't know, FX on Hulu, Disney Plus. So yeah, all of a sudden people are interested in this little club called Wrexham Association Football Club, Wrexham AFC. So yes, that attention can then bring in more revenues, and then more revenues you can spend on players, and then yeah, maybe you'll find your way moving up. So it's possible, but sports is hard.
Sports is
Sports
hard.
is
Yeah.
hard.
Sports is hard. Yeah. And especially, ownership and decision making. I mean, the example that everyone always points to, but I'm going to bring it up again. I feel like I bring this up like once a week to people is Michael Jordan being, not the greatest player, but not the greatest team owner. But far from it, because it's hard. It's not the same as being a player, and it's its own thing, basically. It's its own skill set.
It really is. And for most, I'd say most sports team owners, unlike a player or even unlike, I mean, as a startup, you already have a long time horizon, right? You already have to think in years. But as a sports team owner, you might have to think in a decade or more, right? You buy a team and then you're gradually turning it around. Think about the Golden State Warriors and when Steph Curry came to the team. He was drafted in 2019. 2009, apologies, 2009. That's now 13 years ago. Before Steph Curry, for the most part, the Golden State Warriors were absolutely irrelevant in the NBA. Now, 5 years later, all of a sudden, the Warriors are an incredible team. They win championships. Fast forward another 5 years, and new arena and everything. And so before you know it, 13 years later, which is a very long time, the team's now worth approaching $5 billion. But if you don't have that kind of mindset, and I think you have to have it in sports, where you're thinking in 10-year even increments, it's hard. Like you have to have a long, long breath in sports.
Yeah, and that's actually an interesting dichotomy with how I think a lot of people, not everybody, of course, this is like definitely a stereotype, but a lot of, call it like the opportunistic Web3 group that kind of came in the past year or so. Not so much, like there are definitely people building, longer term visions and things like that, but there were a lot of the participants, not talking about the builders, talking about the people who were buying the NFTs or buying tokens. And that is an interesting dichotomy with how this long-term vision you need in sports versus a lot of the sort of short-term focus on flipping and profits and things like that, because you have these liquid assets, whether it's an NFT or a token that, you could, let's say, in a short period of time, make quite a bit of money if somebody wanted to when it was a bull market. And you could even today in these, ups and downs, volatility allows for the profit taking. But it's interesting that, in sports, the long-term view really is what what prevails if somebody has that long-term vision.
Yeah, and I think you have to also, because if you look at sports, most people are fans of something or support something for pretty much their whole lives, right? I don't know how often sports fans significantly change their allegiances. They might add new teams to their mix, but it's kind of a lifetime fandom in many
It
ways,
is.
lifetime passion,
and you're born into it.
Oftentimes you are. And so I think in that same way, when you're building in sports, you have to be appreciative and respectful of this lifetime fandom that many people have. And that's why I think you need to also have a long-term view. If it's an app, like some random app, I might use it and a better app comes around and I'll use that. Oh, you love Gmail and I don't know, there's another mail app or Google Maps, Apple Maps, like I don't know, silly examples. But you're not going to, if you're a Cavs fan, you're not going to like one year be a Cavs fan, next year you're Warriors, and then you jump to the Knicks, and then like you'll be a Cavs fan most likely for your whole life. And so if something is related to the Cavs, that could be a part of you for many years. And that's why I think you need to have a long-term building mindset within sports and Web3.
Have you seen, like, how do projects incentivize for this? Have you seen interesting incentives for whether it's like, staking the NFT? Like I've seen some projects doing that recently, to just sort of incentivize the long-term view. Because the flip side to democratization, right? Like this is kind of the mirror side of the Jekyll and Hyde sort of way of thinking about it. The good side is anyone can buy an NFT or buy a token and participate. The downside is anybody can buy an NFT and token and participate, right? And so you're not really gatekeeping for the people who have, let's say, already have a fan affiliation with the team or have that long-term view. It's like anybody can do this, whether they're a short-term profiteer or they're thinking long-term. It does, there's no way to gatekeep for that. So I've seen in other spaces, I haven't looked at this so much in sort of the sports and Web3 intersection, but I've seen in other sort of categories within Web3, projects, especially now, trying to incentivize longer term holding. Are there things that you've seen people do to like not necessarily gatekeep, but to maybe attract the longer term view versus the sort of short term?
I'm not sure if I could point to anyone in particular within sports doing it, but I think what's perhaps most interesting, given that the time that we're in now, is that I think there's the realization that you have to still educate hundreds of millions or potentially billions of sports fans around just Web3, period.
Absolutely.
And again, as I mentioned earlier, dispel some of these myths and get people comfortable with what is Web3 and how does it work in the most basic form, and NFTs and blockchain. So I think we're kind of, because there was a lot of hype and FOMO and a lot of people aping into projects of all flavors. I think you're sort of, in sports at least, I think many of your average sports fans kind of, felt left out or were left out, where it was just really difficult for them to get comfortable with the space and what it means and why they should be participating. So I think now is a good opportunity to almost level set a little bit and just look at it from the perspective of, okay, some of the hype and FOMO is out, but what's still there is many hundreds of millions, if not billions, of sports fans that I think would be interested in and open to doing stuff within the space. But it has to start with some level of education and getting them comfortable, and with Web3 and NFTs and blockchain and even crypto, versus just like putting it in their face in almost like an aggressive way.
Yep.
Like I think that it needs to be a bit more tactful, a bit more authentic, if you'd want to use that. But that's, I think, where then you'll get people that are invested long term. If you look at, sorry, one more note. If you look at NBA Top Shot, and NBA Top Shot had a crazy spike in terms of number of users. It was incredible. I think they got to maybe, I don't know, 200,000 buyers or something. I was looking at the numbers a few weeks back, and now the numbers had dropped to, don't quote me, but maybe like 20 or 30,000. Well, those are your real sports fans now, like those are your real fans that actually stuck around. So you have a lot of people that have been just essentially churned, and now you have, I think, a lot of the real fans that stick around. And for those, I think you super serve them. I think you really lean into them and listening to them and offering them as much value as you can. That's where I think it gets really exciting. I think projects now are a lot thinking about the long term, and I think they're leaning into the folks that are also just sticking around.
Yeah, and I think that's an interesting filter moving forward, right? I think it's like, in some ways, you're right. There was this short-term sort of pop, but in some ways, the deflation of that bubble, if you want to call it that, or you want to call it like just a bear market, in some ways incentivizes the participation of the true believers, like people who actually are involved in it. Chris, just a couple things too before we wrap up. One very tactical question. This applies to Fancurve, so feel free to answer it from a Fancurve perspective or just in a more broad sort of ecosystem perspective. If you think about like distribution models, right, for, let's say for Fancurve even, are you relying on reaching consumers directly yourself? Are teams marketing these digital assets? Are like, basically, these teams already have massive audiences, of course. And this came up actually in a prior episode, this sort of like working with partners to reach a broader audience or reach their audience. Are you seeing a lot of that at Fancurve where your team partners, your club partners are pushing this to their audience? Or is it, hey, we'll let you use the rights to these assets and we have some kind of agreement with you, but you're responsible for all the marketing. Like, we're not pushing this to our audience. So just kind of curious, both for Fancurve and then what you see in the ecosystem as well. Like, are teams sort of getting behind this and pushing it to their audience as well? Because to your point on adoption, that is one of the things which I think would maybe take like or bring in the more actual sort of believers rather than the Web3 enthusiasts only, because the teams are reaching all sorts of people, right? And if it's, let's say, I'm a Green Bay Packers fan, was born into it. Let's say I knew nothing about Web3, but the team started posting about, the option to get a, one of 500 sort of digital Aaron Rodgers jerseys or something like that. I would click on it at least and be like, oh, what is this? Like, this is interesting. Even if I knew nothing about Web3, right? And so I guess that's my question is like, how much of this is teams pushing it versus you having to push it yourself?
So in all of the partnerships that we've formed, their support is a fundamental and key part to what we're doing. So we really want to lean into their existing communities, and so that support is really instrumental. Can you do Google ads and Facebook ads and Instagram and stuff like that? Sure, I guess you can. But I think there's nothing ultimately stronger than working with partners that have existing audiences that you can tap into, and that partners that will speak very genuinely, authentically about their excitement in working with you and where they see the future going. That's the most powerful engagement, user acquisition tool in working with really highly aligned partners that share your vision, our vision for the space. That's how I think you become successful. So yes, that is a key fundamental part of all of our partnerships.
Yeah, makes complete sense. So if someone listened to this and was really interested in Fancurve or wanted to hear more from you, what are some good places to do that? I'm sure there's a website, there's probably a Discord, which I'm sure people can participate in.
Sure. Yeah, I think the best and easiest starting point is to go to fancurve.com and browse around, check it out. All of our links to socials, including Discord, are on there. So I think that's the easiest and best starting point. By the way, one note on Discord is that traditional sports fans are not on Discord. By and large, they are not on Discord. I think sometimes and that's what I mentioned earlier about onboarding and getting, traditional sports fans into this space. You have to also meet people where they are. And yes, Web3, Discord is like, oh yeah, everyone uses it, but sometimes the audience that you really want isn't there. You have to find them where they already are, and then maybe you introduce them to Discord if there's any value in doing so. You can't just assume, let's throw out a Discord link and you'll have sports fans joining. Like, doesn't work. Like, they don't know what Discord is. Yeah, for the most part, they have no idea what Discord is, and they probably don't want to use it because they don't see any value in it. So meet them where they are first, and then yes, you can introduce them, assuming it adds value to them, to other tools such as Discord. But find them on Instagram, find them on TikTok, find them on Twitter. engage with them on, other platforms, and then go from there.
Yeah, go where they are, go where they want to engage, and yeah, slowly, if they want to engage more with your universe, they can. They don't have to, because you're also on all these other places.
Exactly.
Cool. Well, Chris, thanks for coming on. This was awesome. I know we could probably talk for like another hour if we want about these, and maybe we do a part 2 in a few months, because I'm sure these things change very quickly in the ecosystem. So I'm sure there'll be some really cool new developments for us to talk about on the intersection of sports and Web3.
Absolutely. And thanks again for having me, Neil. This was fun. And yeah, let's do it again.
Thanks again, Chris.